What's up, y'all? It's your boy JTMM, aka Just 10 More Minutes, aka the Freaking 10. Back again with the Sabaton history. This time in Flanders fields. Now, it was nothing like I was expecting yesterday, as I mentioned in the video. And so to have one like that just come out of nowhere, it just instantly goes, what's this about? And I joke about wanting to know the history, but this one really screams it because you get this amazing song by this choir, full of sound, full of power. And then it's only like 2 minutes roughly. And I was just sitting there going, wow. So here we are with the history. There's not really much else to say about it. Other than, let's switch it up. Let's check it out.
A Sabaton song with no guitars, with no drums, with no Sabaton.
But we did it in Flanders fields.
At 5:10 a.m. in the early morning of November 11, 1918, the German delegation agreed to sign an armistice. Nearly 4 years of unrelenting fighting, killing, and dying in the Great War, the First World War, seemed finally to be coming to an end. The news of the upcoming ceasefire spread like wildfire through the ranks of both sides. Fighting would be stopped at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. However, there was still time until then. Attacks had been planned and scheduled for the morning. Ammunition for the artillery had been prepared, and soldiers had already gathered in the trenches. And indeed, the celebrations in the ranks were quickly quelled by the commanders because the attacks planned for the day were still on. Only a handful of officers purposefully delayed or just ignored the orders to send their men into battle to maybe die mere hours before the end of the war. Some career officers saw their last chance to win glory and recommendation. Others as their duty to follow Allied Supreme Commander Ferdinand Foch's desire to punish the Hun as much as possible. So, while people in cities all over the world went out in the streets this morning celebrating the end of the war, the men in the trenches went out to fight one last time. Up until 10:59, the Allied artillery shot as many of their shells on the German positions as possible as the men went over the top. The surviving German machine guns and artillery gave answer. On this morning alone, 11,000 casualties littered the ground on the Western Front, ground that had already been promised to be relinquished by German High Command upon signing the armistice.
We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow. Loved and we loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields, in Flanders fields.
You know, I got lost in the story there for a second. I'm not sure how to respond to that because, you know, your first gut reaction is anger. But then if you think about it from as Indy put it, right, and you put yourself in these commanders' views, right, or shoes, sorry, and you think about all they've known is war, right, and being attacked and wanting retaliation, and so, yeah, it pisses me off to no end that just pure greed of some of these as to why they went and did it on both sides, right? I mean, as they said. But to truly think about in their shoes, they've done nothing but fight for years, right? And they don't know anything else. That the amount of, I don't even know if it would be hate necessarily, but in the heat of the moment, right? When you're getting fired upon, when you're getting, I think about just in the heat of a moment, when I've been in situations like this, it's a fight or flight type mentality, right? And I don't back down easily. I'm very stubborn. I don't know if y'all know that. But I think about these commanders in these that were in these positions where that's all they've known for years. I kind of get it. I hate it. It's freaking stupid. But man, they didn't know any differently. I mean, quite honestly, and here they are at the end of it. It's like one last time. Let's just, now obviously some of them just didn't want to anymore, right? As he said. But yeah, I mean, I understand that. I don't like it, but yeah, I get it. It's sad.
At 11 a.m., the guns went silent. The Great War came to an end. The final attacks, the last hurrah, had achieved nothing but more death. And who could have justified the fate of those last soldiers dying in this war? What could have been said to the hundreds of grieving widows, parents, and friends that this bloody mourning had caused? The Belgian city of Mons was retaken this morning by the British. Now, this was the place where the war had really started for the British Expeditionary Force back in the summer of 1914. Now, it was the same place where it had ended, for the cost of 1 million lives from all over the British Empire. The last soldier to die here, the Canadian George Price, killed at 10:58, would be buried in the same cemetery as the first soldier that had fallen here. For the generals, it seemed like poetic closure. For most people, it simply symbolized the futility of it all. Many might have remembered the words of Lawrence Binion from back in August 1914, who wrote a poem honoring the fallen of the first battles of the war, a poem whose words were, by 1918, inscribed in monuments all over Great Britain. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
That's pretty cool.
It is often said that poetry speaks directly from a person's soul. Although it is defined by sets of rules and the need for structure and aesthetics that are only mastered by a few, poetry could be written by anyone, anywhere. And during the Great War, people wrote. Soldiers often needed a way to occupy their thoughts. Left with not much else than a pencil and a piece of paper, they began putting down those thoughts and feelings and wrote down what they had experienced and witnessed during times of extreme stress, hardship, or excitement. The air is loud with death. The dark air spurts with fire. The explosions ceaseless are. Timelessly now, some minutes passed. Those dead strode time with vigorous life, till the shrapnel called an end. But not to all. In bleeding pangs, some borne on stretchers dreamed of home. Dear things, war blotted from their hearts. Isaac Rosenberg, Dead Man's Dump. Unlike a letter or a diary, poetry had to be written and rewritten time and time again to get the language and the rhythm right. But when well crafted, it could speak and even scream the feelings of people who lived through the same times and the same experiences, but who did not have the words to express it themselves.
That's a fascinating way to look at it, because you could say the same thing about songwriting, right? Songwriting over time has really evolved. It's no longer the basic rhyme scheme of rhyme, 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 or rhyme, line, rhyme, you see stuff that doesn't rhyme at all, as I've pointed out many a times, compared to back then when a lot of these songs, if you go back and listen to a lot of them, it is a rhyme, rhyme, rhyme. Not all, but a lot of them. And it is, I wouldn't even say it's no longer for songwriting is it mastered by few, it's mastered by many. I've got over 600 videos that could prove that. But yeah, you think about taking what you've seen in that and turning it into an art, right? And that's just, there's something masterful, and as Indy said, it speaks from the soul. Oh, that gives you chills.
Beginning before antiquity, before Homer's Iliad spoke of war and tragedy in epic form, and continuing thousands of years later, ordinary soldiers tried to tell the story of their war, in this case, the Great War. In the beginning, they spoke of grandeur and glory to be won on the field of honor. War has its horrors, but has this of good, that its sure processes sort out and bind brave hearts in one intrepid brotherhood and leave the shams and imbeciles behind. Now turn we joyful to the great attacks, not only that we face in a fair field our valiant foe and all his deadly tools, but also that we turn disdainful backs on that poor world we scorn yet die to shield, that world of cowards, hypocrites, and fools.
I like that.
Alan Seeger on returning to the front after leave. But as the war grew longer and more savage and brutal over the years, its poetry changed as well. It began focusing less on ideals and heroes and more on death and loss. Wilfred Owen made a name for himself by writing about the tragedy of the war and wrote in the preface of his book in May 1918, "This book is not about heroes. English poetry is not yet fit to speak of them, nor is it about deeds or lands, nor anything about glory, honor, might, majesty, dominion, or power, except war.
Wow.
Above all, I am not concerned with poetry. My subject is war and the pity of war." If
So well
in
said.
some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce e decorum est, pro patria mori. Wilfred Owen, dulce et decorum
Wow.
est. Those words, that old lie, as he calls it, are Latin, written by the Roman poet Horace, and mean, "It is sweet and fitting to die for the homeland." Owen did not agree. One poem that immortalized the dying in Flanders and in the Great War overall was In Flanders Fields by John McCrae. McCrae was a military doctor and a major of the 1st Brigade of Canadian Field Artillery. In April and May 1915, they were fighting the Second Battle of Ypres. It is believed that after witnessing the death of a dear friend, McCrae looked out over the bombed-out battlefield, devastated, torn, and blasted, but in that grimness, the poppy flowers still bloomed, despite all the poison and death in the soil. Those small crimson flowers bloomed and were soon associated with the blood the men had shed. When the wind blew strongly and the poppy petals flew around and settled on the field, it was like the blood of the fallen drenching the earth once more. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who died, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
You know, that so I wasn't sure when I recorded in Flanders Field who wrote it or anything like that, but I did obviously in the lyrics below it does show Joachim and John McCrae. Um, now obviously John McCrae is not a name I had seen across any of their songs before. And so, you know, but I didn't I didn't go research it or anything like that. I truly leave this to Sabaton history to explain it to me. Sometimes that's hard, right? Today's actually Wednesday and I'm recording here. It's, you know, 4:25 in the morning. So later today you'll see my reaction or yeah, later today you'll see my reaction and this one you'll see tomorrow, which will be Thursday. And so I truly don't go after I do a song. If there's a history behind it, I either wait for y'all to tell me about it, and then I watch the history the next day. You know, from my lovely friends that I just absolutely adore, Mia and M and Melkor, and you know everybody that chimes in on these histories. You know, that give me the information, and then I can watch the history and I have a little bit more. This one's an instance where I don't even have that because y'all haven't even seen my reaction to it yet. And so now it makes more sense, right? Of how it's laid out and why there's not the Sabaton music to it. It's so freaking beautiful though, but now it makes a lot of sense. I had an inkling that when you talk about in Flanders Fields, you know, and they talked about, you know, the death and such, that's what it was going to be about. But didn't know John McCrae was a soldier, didn't know any of that. That's why I love these histories. It's just so informative.
This phenomenon was observed by the locals as well. Women sold poppies and made artificial ones out of cloth to collect money for war orphans who lived close to the battlefield. In August 1921, the artificial poppies were brought to London for the first time and attracted the attention of the British Legion, a recently formed charitable organization. Immediately, they began to import and distribute the poppies as well. On the next Armistice Day, they would sell them to gather money for the benefits of the many thousands of unemployed and struggling ex-servicemen. A first order for 1 million poppies was placed. On November 11th, on every corner in London, at every major park, theater, hotel, bands of young girls sold poppies to the public. It was 1 shilling for those made out of silk and 3 pence for those made out of linen. Petals from actual poppy flowers were sold for £5, and single whole poppy flowers were auctioned for up to £90. Soon the poppy craze caught all of London and beyond. Nearly every pilgrim and tourist who came to honor the fallen on Armistice Day at the cenotaph wore one at their collar, and soldiers were given permission to wear them on their uniforms. By the end of the day, around 8 million poppies had been sold, and it was still not enough to meet the demand. A great deal of money had been gathered for victims of the war. In subsequent years, the poppy became the universal symbol of remembrance. Disabled ex-servicemen went to work to manufacture them. John McCrae's poem In Flanders Fields became a popular evergreen, and like the poppy itself, became a symbol of remembrance.
Oh, these damn onion ninjas.
Now, In Flanders Fields is the last song on your most recent album, The Great War. You want to talk about why you decided how you were going to do that?
So, all in all here, we have a very, very high energy, very powerful album.
Yeah.
And potentially the strongest song we have ever written is the last real proper metal song, The End of the War to End All Wars. And at the end of this song, because it's just rising and rising and rising, we get to the climax, which is maybe the most epic moment in all the Sabaton songs. We couldn't just stop the album there. The listener, the people needed something to like calm down to. And we wanted to end the album in a very honorable way, so to say. And so we needed something that was more quiet. We didn't know exactly what, but as we were doing the research for the album,
Yeah.
I was spending a lot of time looking for poems from World War One. And obviously then, you know, you can't miss this one.
No, it's sort of the iconic one too. I mean, that's a beautiful choice. I remember, you know, and I've had to read it twice during the entire filming of the Great War, and it's really hard to read without actually, when you read it out loud, it's so powerful. Especially talking about the Great War all the time, it's really hard to read. Challenge you, try to read it out loud without like getting tears, you know.
You know, just listening to it, I'm sitting here, you know, and I didn't have that same reaction to it yesterday because I was just so enamored with what was going on. I honestly don't remember if I thought that they wrote it. I saw the John McCrae, but I know I commented more of how to get that emotion across through a choir, without any of their stuff, right? And without them singing. But I don't know if I said if they wrote it or not. I don't remember. But this makes a lot of sense. And again, you know, probably for a lot of the, you know, my European subscribers, you already knew about this poem. This was nothing that we were ever shown, right? So this is truly brand new. And yeah, I mean, to hear that and now equate it across and knowing a soldier wrote it in the time that they wrote it brings up so much emotion, right? Just Indy's 100% correct. Just listening to it for me, just for the first time, understanding the meaning of it, yeah, it gets you emotional. That's the beauty. And I'll go back and I said this, the actually on quite a few things I've said about Sabaton, right, is that the research, right? Think about that for a second. Musicians that are actually doing research about a topic to go in and then create songs off of that using realistic facts. Now, and that's not a shot against other musicians, right? I mean, the songs come from the heart. Songs come from the soul, from creativity, from life experiences, right? But to take that different twist and just put it in perspective of what these guys do, it still has me in awe of how well they do it. It's that corner niche market, right? Of all of this history, because there's so much history they can choose from, and so many heroes, so many villains, so many, you know, wars, and all of this stuff, and they've gone in after that. But it's not, and I say niche market not in a negative way, but it's brilliant because they also love history. And so it's like right up their alley. I mean, take that into consideration in the music industry. There's very, very few that have done that. And that's what truly makes them special in my eyes. And to then take one of their songs, and as Paris said, they could have ended it, right? And just gone about their day. Nobody really would have second guessed them if it would have ended on, and I don't know what the last song is, but would anybody truly have questioned it? And the answer is probably not. But they went that step further. That's what I love about these guys, is they truly think about their audience in the sense of how do we tell these stories, and then how do we bring them back down from an emotional high and to calm them down. Just that respect for them just keeps going.
Challenge.
Now, writing poetry for young men was a lot more common than that it is today, although, of course, today a lot of young men write, like, music lyrics. But this was a regular, everyday pastime for a lot of people. I mean, all of your newspapers had poetry that was published in peacetime or wartime pretty much every day by people that wrote it in. And you or I would have read it every day. It wouldn't have been weird or anything. So this was a major way to explain your feelings about the war. Whereas today, if someone went to Afghanistan, you might think, oh, he wrote a poem about his feelings, but you might think that's a little odd. But it wasn't odd then. This was the way to write your feelings about that. And some of the other great World War I poets, Siegfried Sassoon, and Wilfred Owen, I read a few of his, and he's one of the, up there with McCrae, who wrote In Flanders Fields. Wilfred Owen is one of the major iconic World War I poets, and his story is, well, many of the World War I stories, if not all, are tragic, but his is exceptionally tragic because not only was the famous poet, a famous war poet, he fought in the war as a regular soldier. He died fighting November 4th, 1918. That's 7 days, 1 week before the end of the war. You know, somebody had to be the last guy. Somebody had to be the guy. If you dies,
He wasn't the last guy.
he wasn't. You know, some guys died the morning of November
I know.
11th. You know, it's got to be really sad. Now, the Poetry Foundation has a whole World War I section. You can just Google World War I Poetry Foundation. It's all free to look around and stuff. You can find McCrae stuff. You can find Sassoon stuff. And I really like Wilfred Owen. He's probably my favorite.
And how can it be that some of them are so prominent? Like this one takes basically all the fame.
Well, it does now.
I was trying to find, more of them, but this one takes the whole.
This became
spectrum.
so iconic for, especially for Canada. This is a real symbol of, because Canada's national identity, to a pretty big degree, was formed in the First World War. I mean, you have Canadian soldiers that said, we went up the hill as, British soldiers, and we came down as Canadians. And same thing with the Anzacs, the Australians and New Zealanders. They forged a big part of their emerging national identity in the war. And McCrae, of course, this is a big part of that. It's really funny because since we don't read poetry so often, that when you do read something that's so hard-hitting, I mean, in Flanders Fields is
Yeah,
So
definitely.
true.
So I think 10 points to you guys for doing that,
And imagine in the future. I mean, okay, so we are writing now stories about about battles and stuff, and about people. I wonder if we would write it if we were there ourselves.
Yeah. How you might write your experience. It may be a power metal song, but it would still be a hard-hitting song.
Like if we would go, let's pretend it will never happen. I mean, let's hope it will never happen. But what if we would go to war and we would have to sing about it or write poems? Would it be like a power metal song?
Thank you everybody for watching, and thank you everybody for supporting. And those who don't do it, click the bell, subscribe, and become a patron. Thank you very much.
He's just so humble. I absolutely love that guy. He's just, all of them are so, I mean, obviously we see what Tommy does and we see what Joachim and Per do with the history. They're just all so humble, and not everybody in the industry is like that, right? Greed has taken over for many, but these guys just have they just think of things differently, and it shows in their music, obviously, and it shows in how they consciously make efforts. And a lot of bands do make efforts. I don't want my earlier comments of their thought process to think that they're unique in that. A lot of bands think about the flow of their songs in an album. But when you're writing about war, when you're writing about heroes, when you're writing about villains, how do you truly, put those in an order? And now, granted, I mean, you and I don't do that on an everyday basis like these guys do, so it probably comes a little bit more natural for them. But I think about, as I've started to think about writing an actual conceptual album based on my inspiration from bands like Sabaton and Ginger and Nightwish, and more specifically The Warning and their conceptual album they did with Queen of the Murder Scene. you have to think about that order that you put it in. And so for these guys to do that, it's just awesome. But they just say they stay so humble. And that's just I love these guys for that. Uh, and you know, you think about in Flanders Fields, and you think about poetry, and you saw. I don't know if y'all saw it, and I don't know that I could go back to that exact moment, but there's a moment when Pear says, "There's so many of them, but this one gets all the fame." And you almost see his facial expression. I don't know where it is within in this conversation, but if actually I think it was right in that 14-minute mark. Go watch Pear's face. He gets a little aggravated. And I don't say that in a sense of, you know, a true anger, but go watch his mood a little bit. And he says, why does this one get all the fame, right? When there's so many of them. Go watch. It was an interesting little tidbit I picked up on just his facial expression. His nose flared a little bit and his eyes, he just had a little bit of a different look. Go check it out. And I get it because there are so many, right? Why do some of these get to be the prominent ones? And like that Wilfred I think it was Wilfred Owen was the name. That one that he wrote was just beautiful. That could be, but you know, in Flanders Fields is one that is just as powerful, right? And the poppy flower and those, you know, the petals, it's one of those things where it's like it is that symbol, right? Man, not what I was expecting of the history behind it after just hearing it, you know, what would be yesterday. Yeah. Wow. Let me switch it up, give you my final thought. You know, I don't know what else I can add to what I just said, but it's just I walk away when I do these recordings, you know, and I've done now quite a few Sabaton recordings. I still walk away amazed every single time. And it's something that y'all have experienced, right? As fans of Sabaton, y'all have experienced this emotional ride that they send you on with each of these stories that they tell. And hearing it for the first time, you know, it's so fascinating. As a lyricist, you know, that's where I get this such a deep admiration for them of being able to take these stories and turn them into a song. And I've never tried that, right? A songwriter is a songwriter. A lyricist is a lyricist. A lyricist, you give them a title and they can run with it. I kid you not. You know, I see that this was created by Stuffed Beaver, you know, LTD. Literally, if I sat down, I could probably write about a stuffed beaver. When you think that way, that's what you do. So, you know, these guys went in and said, we love history. We love everything about it. As far as how people tell these stories and such, let's take these and create songs and teach the world, right? And that's what they've done. They've taught the world so many untold stories, or stories that were not as well known in some parts of the world versus others, and done it amazingly. And man, love these freaking guys. I can't stress that enough. As a songwriter, as just a human, I freaking love them. You know, y'all know what to do. Like, subscribe, share. Y'all know how much content I put out there. I put out 18 to 20 videos a week, you know, which is probably more than some of the top reactors out there. I don't do it for views. I don't do it. Well, okay. That's kind of a lie. In the sense of, I don't go put something out there just because it's popular, right? I could go do mainstream music if I wanted to get 1,000,000 views. I don't. I want the songs like this that tell a true story. I want those, bands that have a loyal following, but you don't hear about them on the radio per se to say, hey, did you hear about this? Or did you hear about this? Or, you just don't hear about a lot of these bands like this. Yet they have such a major following. And that's why I continuously cover them, is because they appeal to me. Right? I don't want to be that reactor that goes and covers, a popular hip hop song because I want views. I would be bored as absolute hell. Oh my God. Anyway, that's another tangent. Y'all know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, all of that stuff. Y'all know who I am, what I'm about. And guess what? I'll make a rhyme, and now I'm out.